All right, we're going to jump right into the middle of a verse, zero context, just an isolated verse with a really, really big idea behind it. It's Proverbs 14:12. It says, "There is a way which seems right to a man." It's kind of right, kind of wrong, because I don't think that there's just a way. I think there's lots of ways that seem right to a man, ways that feel right and make perfect sense to us. There's an unending list of ways that people choose to live, and we all think that we are right. You yourself have chosen many different ways. You've chosen a way to live and a way to date, a way to parent and a way to spend, a way to work, a way to play. We choose our way based on what feels right to us. So when you chose your spouse, you were confident that you knew the way to the future that you wanted to have. When you chose them, you thought you knew how to get to have happily ever after. And then you chose a college, or you chose a job, or you chose your neighborhood, whatever it may be. You chose your friends. When you choose those things, you're confident that it's going to move you in the best direction for your life. You thought you knew the way. Solomon wrote these words that we started with. Solomon was considered the wisest man to have ever lived, at least according to Scripture. And maybe that's not real significant or impressive to you, but according to what the Word of God says, Solomon is this really wise man, right? And he says there's a way which seems right to a man, but in the end it leads to death. Now, Doc has a book on his shelf with a unique premise that he's mentioned to me a few times. The book is called Being Wrong. I think he's mentioned it to me several times because he thought I was wrong. Anyways, I'm going to do something with you here. I want to do a little practice, a little thought experiment with you here. Okay, I want you to follow along. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to actually engage and think to try to answer the question, okay? I'm going to give you permission to lean over and maybe say to your neighbor your answer to the question. It's a simple question. It's not real complex. I just need you to participate, okay? Here's the question. How does it feel to be wrong? How does it feel to be wrong? Now think through. Get an answer. You have permission to talk. You can lean over. Tell the person next to you, what do you think it feels like to be wrong? Now some of you are like, I don't know, I've never been wrong. And that's the wrong answer, okay? That's not it. Some of you are struggling, wrong, I've never heard of her, right? No, that's not it. All right. Now, I bet your answer was wrong. Based on my understanding of this book and listening to the author speak on it, I bet that you answered this question incorrectly. And you didn't mean to, but you accidentally answered a different question. Your answer was probably something like sad or upset. It's disappointing or it's embarrassing, right? Like those are probably the answers that you gave, right? But that's not what it feels like to be wrong. That's what it feels like to realize that you were wrong. It's a different question, right? You answered a question, what does it feel like to realize you were wrong? That's what it feels like, right? It means that many of you are experiencing that right now because I asked you a question and you answered it. And now I'm telling you the answer was wrong. And so now you're experiencing what it's like to have been wrong. So the author of Being Wrong says that we all know what it feels like to realize we were wrong because we can look back, even if it was just a few moments ago, and we can see where we were wrong. But what does it feel like to be wrong? To be in the position of being wrong? What does that feel like? It feels like being right. When you're wrong, but you don't know that you're wrong, you think you're right. And so it feels like being right. Being wrong feels exactly like being right. All of us right here, right now, are wrong about a whole bunch of stuff. And we don't know it. And it feels right. There's an Allstate commercial on TV right now. It's airing during a lot of the football games that I just absolutely love. It features this fan. He's standing outside of the stadium. All these players from the Alabama football team are walking into the stadium, and he starts giving out this chant. Have you seen this commercial? It's wonderful. It makes me laugh every time. So he starts yelling, "High Tide," at the whole team as they're walking in, which is clever, except that that's not the right thing, right? The team, if you're an Alabama fan, you chant, that had to be you just knowing the answer, not you actually participating and being an Alabama fan, certainly, right? But it's Roll Tide, okay? They chant Roll Tide. And so he's out there just yelling High Tide, which I think actually makes more sense, and I'm a fan of. I actually kind of want to go to an Alabama game of some sort now and just chant High Tide. I think it's a great idea. Anyways, nonetheless, you got this man chanting the wrong thing at these players. They're looking at him very strangely, and this woman next to him in the commercial leans over and says, "You're doing this wrong. That's not the right thing." And she corrects him. And by the end of the commercial, he's changed what he's doing because he's confronted and he immediately corrects himself, because that's what we usually do, isn't it? When we find out we're wrong, the embarrassment, the disappointment causes us to alter ourselves towards what is right. And so if you're arguing with your spouse and you realize that you're wrong, well, some of you might not know what that's like, okay? But in theory, if you are arguing with your spouse and you find out that in the context of it that you're wrong, then you would change something, right? Maybe you would apologize and admit being wrong, or more likely, you would decide to argue a different point to distract from the place where you're wrong, right? That's what we do. Because we all want to be right. We all want to be right. We don't like to be wrong. And so if you're driving down the road and you realize that you're going the wrong way, you make an adjustment. Maybe it looks like a U-turn. Maybe you turn to the left or to the right, but you certainly just don't keep going in that direction. You've now determined that's wrong. And so we don't pretend that the wrong way is the right way. We could sum it up like this: no one is wrong on purpose, but all of us are, more often than we realize. Now, what's so dangerous about being wrong is that we don't know when it's happening. We don't recognize the moment that we move from being right to being wrong. When you're driving somewhere, maybe you're hiking, maybe you're trying to navigate through the parking lot on Black Friday, and you don't know the exact moment that you move from knowing where you are and where you're going to now all of a sudden you're lost, right? By the time you realize that you're lost, you've been lost for a while. It's the same way with being wrong. You can end up on the wrong trail or the wrong road or going the wrong direction for quite some time without knowing it. You can end up believing the wrong thing or acting the wrong way or trusting the wrong people for quite some time without knowing it. The danger of being wrong is that it happens accidentally. It sneaks up on you. You didn't intend to be wrong, it just happens. And by the time we realize we've lost our way, we've already been lost for quite some time. By the time we realize we were wrong, we've already been wrong for quite some time. And do you know how whenever you lose something and you look around, you find it, and then we say that dumb phrase that everybody says, right? Like, "Oh, it was in the last place that I looked for it." Well, duh, okay? Because no one finds something but then looks in 3 other places just to make sure. That doesn't make sense. Of course you found it in the last place you looked. It makes complete sense, right? It's the same thing with being wrong. We find out we're wrong, so we stop being wrong. But when we're wrong or when we're lost, we don't know. And so we move confidently and cluelessly. If you thought you were wrong, you'd change your mind. You do something about it, but no one changes their mind when they think they're right. And that's why we often fight and defend ourselves until someone can prove us wrong. It's why a man will keep driving in the wrong direction. His pride won't allow him to believe that he's going the wrong way. It's going to require some undeniable proof. The evidence has to be overwhelming. Has that ever happened to you? Ever been confronted? Has someone ever said, "Hey, you're driving the wrong way"? Or has anyone ever told you, "Hey, you're making the wrong decisions"? Or, "Hey, you need to turn your life around"? When we hear those kinds of confrontations that we're lost or that we're wrong, we don't typically agree right away. Usually, we push back. Because when we're wrong or when we're lost, we're always the last ones to know it or admit it. So the danger of being wrong lies in this: we don't know when we're wrong. Which means sometimes we don't know when we are living dangerously. We don't know when we're living on the edge of death. Solomon says we have all these different ways that lead to death, which means that you could be going through your life right now, making decisions, building a life that you think seems right. It feels right. It seems to be the right way. It feels like your path is going to take your life where you want it to go. But in reality, you could be flirting with death. You might, without knowing it, be playing with something that could kill you, and you don't even know it. There's lots and lots of ways, lots of different paths that we choose to feel like we're on the right path. There's many ways to live that feel like the right way, which makes us feel confident, and the idea of being wrong doesn't even cross your mind, right? But according to Solomon, it's a dead end. You're marching down a road to death without knowing it. And I think you know that he's right. I think you don't even have to be a Jesus follower to know that this is right. I think every single one of us at some point in our lives has experienced this truth. I bet that you've had some sort of a relationship. That could be a boyfriend or a girlfriend. It could be a husband or a wife. It could be a best friend. It could be even with your parents, right? I don't know what it looks like, but I guarantee that you've had a relationship at some point where you thought that they were a gift from God. And now you look back and you believe that they were a thorn from Satan. Right? You were wrong. You misunderstood. Maybe you thought that job was going to be the right way, that you thought that was going to be a blessing from God. Maybe it was, the boat or the bigger house or the new exercise plan, whatever it was. You thought you found your solution. You thought it was the right way, but you were wrong. And when you got to the end of that way, the end of that path, the end of that season of life, there was nothing but sadness, despair, brokenness, death. If you've been wrong, and if you've ever been in that place, if you've ever been lost, then I bet you've said these words or words like them. I'm not sure where to turn. I don't know how to get back to the person I was. I don't know how to get through this. I don't know how to get past this. I'm not in a good place. I need to change course. I've lost my way. If you've ever been wrong, I bet you have. I know I have. Then there's something else that you know to be true. You know that you can't get to where you want to be until you recognize where you are. Until you recognize that you're lost. Until you recognize that you're wrong. And I bet that you know people, it may even be you, who refuse to admit that they are wrong or that they are lost. Because no one likes to admit that they are wrong or lost, because no one got there on purpose. No one knows they're wrong until confronted. And here's the key, you can't get right until you admit that you are wrong. So Merry Christmas. What does it feel like to get right? To get on the right path, to move from being wrong and lost to being right and found. What does it look like to do that? Oftentimes, we're going to solve it with what we can accomplish on our own. We're in that Christmas season right now, but you know what's just lurking, right around the corner after Christmas. You guys remember there's this week after Christmas before New Year's where no one knows what day it is, and we lose all sense of time, and we feel bloated, right? But life is good. But we start thinking about the New Year's, and we start having these resolutions start coming up. We start thinking about decisions and disciplines, habits to break, goals to set, advice to seek. It's what we do every year. We try to live a better way by making better decisions. We think, I need to make new decisions. I need to practice some new disciplines. I need to work on my new habits. I need to set new goals. I need to seek out new advice, new voices in my life. But before New Year's, Christmas offers a different option. Christmas offers us a person. At Christmas, we are introduced to someone who not only claimed to know the way that we should live, but he claimed to be the way that we should live. And it looks like this. In the gospel accounts of the New Testament, you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew and Luke tell the Christmas story, very chronological, very historical sounding. It is a journal entry, if nothing else, right? But then you have Mark, who has no time for the Christmas story. Jesus just appears out of nowhere in his gospel, and he's already in ministry in his older age, right? And then you have John. John does something very different. While Matthew and Luke try to stick to the story, John tells the Christmas story with a very unique twist. John takes language from Genesis chapter 1, the creation poem of the Old Testament, and he uses it to introduce Jesus. Now, John had been a close follower of Jesus. He lived with him for 3 years. He slept where Jesus slept. He ate what Jesus ate. He heard Jesus' public teachings and his private teachings. He heard the big ideas that were communicated to the masses, and he also had the opportunity to sit with Jesus and ask questions and get more details behind the scenes. He got to ask questions and have personal interactions. John had the opportunity to live closely with Jesus, to be corrected for his own misbehaviors and shortcomings, to experience an intimacy and proximity to Jesus that most never had. This means that John had a unique opportunity to see everything about Jesus. And this is what John had to say about Jesus in his own unique retelling of the Christmas story. He says, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us." If you go back to Genesis chapter 1, it says that God spoke everything into existence. There was an effort of speaking, and somehow creation happened through the Word. When John says the word here in chapter 1, he's not talking about language, he's talking about Jesus. It's why it's capitalized. John says that God was there at the creation of all things, and so was Jesus. That was a new idea. It's a new way of looking at God. When he says the Word became flesh, he's connecting something that happened at the beginning of time to a very specific moment in history in a manger. The Word in the beginning became flesh. John is calling Jesus God. He claims that God became human and that he personally witnessed it. That this wasn't just some theory or something that he'd heard about or read about, something that had happened centuries before his time. No. John says, I saw it. I experienced it. And the whole idea of who God is, the complicated, complex, difficult to explain God, John claims to have experienced it face to face. This God, who is unseen and unheard, became seen and heard, starting in a manger. John says the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only. John says that they lived with him. They ate with him. They shared every joy and every pain with God. That every personal thing John dealt with during his time as a disciple of Jesus, Jesus participated in that with him. Every personal thing Jesus experienced during those years of ministry, John was right there experiencing it with him. They shared every joy and every pain together. John shared every joy and every pain with God, face to face. And they got to know who God is. This glory of God was revealed to them. The incredible nature of God was revealed to John through this God-man named Jesus. And so what is it that gets revealed? This Jesus, according to John, revealed something surprising. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. That's the glory. God on earth revealed to us that God is a God of grace and truth. It's very simply who he is. One of the ways we realize, talking about being wrong, one of the ways we realize we are wrong is when we come face to face with truth. And this statement, full of grace and truth, that's a huge statement. It's something we take very seriously here at Cap City. John claims that when you're in Jesus' presence, and listen, he would know because he was there spending years with Jesus. He says that when you're in his presence, you become aware of your sin. If you spend some time with Jesus, you start to see some things that are wrong about you, which can be painful. And when you become aware of how wrong you are and how lost you are, it can sting. Truth does that. Now remember, the danger of being wrong is that you don't know it. To be wrong and not know it, that's worse than being wrong and having it exposed. But John says not when Jesus is around. When Jesus is around, you are painfully aware. You get that awkward feeling of realizing that you're wrong because there's no limit to his truth. There's no limiting the truth of who God is in the person of Jesus. He was the fullness of truth. And yet, at the same time, at the very same time when you're in that space with Jesus and that awkward feeling of realizing just how wrong you are, it's not just about the truth, it's also about grace. At the same time of experiencing the awkwardness of being wrong, you're overwhelmed with the love of God. Sorry about that. The grace of God overwhelms even the conviction and the awkwardness of truth. John claims that God became man and God revealed himself to be both grace and truth. Now that's a cool story. And it's a cool twist on the Christmas story, and that's the way that John starts his Jesus story. But the Jesus story isn't cool because of how it starts, although it is kind of cool. It's all about how the story ends. On the last night of Jesus' life, he says something that pulls this whole picture together. I'm sorry, guys. I've been battling a cough for a week. And so I've taken all this medication. It's dried me out. And now I'm coughing because I'm dry. It's awful. Kentucky is trying to kill me. Anyways. All right, stay focused with me, all right? At the end of Jesus' life, he says something that pulls this whole picture together, okay? If you jump to John chapter 14, it's the last night of Jesus' life. It's before his crucifixion. He's talking to his disciples, and he says that he's going to leave them. And then he promises them that they know how to find him, which is weird. And it's kind of cryptic. It's unclear exactly what he's saying. So there's a disciple who has enough boldness to ask about what's going on. I thought I was going to make it through. All right. So oftentimes we know this guy's doubting Thomas, but I give him a lot of credit, okay? He speaks up and he says, hey, we don't know what you're talking about. We don't know what's going on here. We don't know where you're going, so how do we know the way? That's what we've been talking about all morning, isn't it? Isn't that the problem for all of us? We don't know the way. Thomas is talking very literally. I mean, he thinks Jesus is going to a physical location, and he thinks he's supposed to get to that physical location. But this is what we've been talking about all morning metaphorically, right? This is what Proverbs 14 is all about with Solomon. There's ways that seem right to us, but they lead to death. And we don't know the way. We think we know the way to a good life, and we make our best guesses and our best efforts, and the paths we choose feel right, but sometimes all we do is just dig a deeper hole. And so we try to have good relationships, but we end up bringing our own problems into them. Or we adopt the problems of the people that we bring into them. And so then we just, try to be successful. We try to be important. We try to accomplish good things or have a positive influence. We try all sorts of ways to have a good life. All the ways that feel right to us. Thomas has enough guts to say, I don't know if we know the right way. But Jesus responds with some of his most powerful words. He says, I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. When we realize that we've lost our way in life, we want to fix, we want to plan, we want to list, we want a self-help book, but God offers something better. He offers himself. He sent us himself. He became one of us to show us the lost and the broken. He came to show us the way. So are you lost? Jesus says, I'm the way. Are you wrong about something? Jesus says, hey, I'm the truth. You may think that your life is too messed up, that you're too far gone, too lost to ever find a way back to God. But Jesus says, I am the way. If you know me, then you know the way. It's who I am. Come to me. And you may think that you can't get through whatever life is challenging you with right now. Maybe the holidays are overwhelming and painful because of what you've lost. Maybe your health feels like a mountain that you can't climb. Maybe all you see are consequences in your future because of the many wrong paths that you've taken. You've picked so many wrong ways that you can't possibly see how this could ever work out. And you may not see a way through the mess that you're in, but Jesus says, I'm the way. I'm that way that you're looking for to get things right. I'm the way. And you may think that your life will never be what you hoped and dreamed. You were pursuing a way that you thought was right and it felt right, but you looked up and you realized that you were nowhere near where you wanted to be. You may not see a way forward. You feel wrong. So wrong. And you're so far off that you don't think you could ever be right. Jesus says, I am the way. I'm the truth. If you're looking for the right way, if you're looking to no longer be lost, come to me. I'm the way. I'm the truth. And so this holiday season, instead of asking, what should I do? Maybe we should change that a little bit to who will I follow? Instead of trying to fix your life yourself, instead of pursuing strategies to make your life what you want it to be, maybe you should just pursue a person. And that's what the Christmas story is actually all about. At Christmas, we celebrate a God who became one of us to show us the way back to him. Because we are lost and we don't know it. We need to know the way. And we are wrong and we don't know it. We need to know the truth. So what is it that moves you from being lost to no longer being lost? What is it that moves you from being wrong to now being right? Something has to change. And sometimes all it takes is just some self-awareness, the ability to look around and see that you aren't where you need to be. You're lost. Or the ability to just look around and see that what you're doing isn't working. You're wrong. But sometimes it takes something much more drastic. Sometimes we need an encounter with an overwhelming truth, something that will shake us to our core, something that changes absolutely everything, something like the way, the truth, also being the life. And we'll talk more about that next week. In the meantime, let's close out with some Christmas stuff, right? In Luke's telling of the Christmas story, an angel appears to some shepherds telling them about Jesus' birth, and the angel calls it good news for all people. And the reason an angel can proclaim the birth of Jesus as good news is because Jesus' way is the way we were all created to live. He's taught us the way, but he did more than that. He showed us. He didn't just know the way to live, he claimed to be the way that we should live. And that invitation offered by an angel to some shepherds is a standing invitation. You qualify as part of all people. You are invited to this way. But this way doesn't begin with a commitment to turn your life around. You've already tried that. You've read the self-help books. You've made the New Year's resolutions. You've made different decisions. You've even asked people to come along and help you do the right things. His way doesn't begin with a commitment to turn your life around. It begins with a decision to follow. It begins with surrender. It begins with admitting that you're wrong. It begins with admitting that you're lost. It begins by simply saying, I need someone to show and tell me the right way to live. John says, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That's what makes the Christmas story so astounding. I want you to go back to how it all started. It's from Luke. He says the time came for the baby to be born. And she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger. There it is. The way in a manger. The truth in a manger. And that's your invitation. That's your opportunity to come and participate in this way. And I know that maybe all of us are in different places. I know that maybe you're wondering, you have questions about what does it look like to have a relationship with this God, man. I'd love to have that conversation with you. I'll be sitting up front. Love for you to come up and do that. We've also got an elder in our prayer room back in the corner of the room where if you want some prayer, if you want have some questions, they'd love to talk to you about that as well. Doc or I will be over in our connections room after the service if you want to have a longer conversation. It's an incredible invitation that the God of the universe cares so deeply about us that he became one of us. It's mind-blowing. It's all because he wanted to show us the way. All because he wanted to offer himself as the way. And don't miss that opportunity. Why don't you stand and I'll pray us back into worship. God, I thank you so much for this day. Thank you for how good you are to us. I thank you that your patience is unending. God, I thank you that your grace and your mercy doesn't give up. God, I thank you that you love us so much that you chose to become part of your own creation. That as God, you took on flesh because we were worth it. God, help us to see what it is that you've done for us. Help us to respond appropriately. Give us hearts of courage. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.